Magic Johnson. A name so powerful it doesn't just echo through the history of American sports, it thunders through it. His story isn't just written in record books, it's engraved in the memories and hearts of millions. To basketball fans across the globe, he isn't merely a legend, he's a force of nature, a living spark of wonder. Magic wasn't just the greatest point guard to ever guide an offense. He was electricity in motion, a smile that lit arenas, a presence that made every game feel like a celebration. He was the pulse of the Showtime Lakers, the man who transformed the Los Angeles Lakers into a dynasty and elevated basketball into pure entertainment. Wherever he played, the court became a stage, the crowd became a stage, the crowd became a choir, and the game became something almost spiritual. 5 NBA championships, 3 MVP awards, 12 All-Star selections, over 17,000 points, more than 10,000 assists. These aren't numbers, they're monuments. They stand as proof of a career so extraordinary it doesn't just shine, it roars. And then, when life delivered a blow meant to break him, when the world believed he would fade into the shadows, Magic didn't simply survive. He rose. He roared back with the same fire that defined his game. He rebuilt. He reinvented himself, and he emerged stronger, creating a business empire worth more than $1, 5 cents billion, and becoming one of the most influential athlete entrepreneurs America has ever known. But even the brightest lights cast shadows. Behind the championships, behind the empire, behind the unstoppable smile, there are scars. There is pain carved by illness, heartbreak, betrayal, and battles fought far from the spotlight. Magic has carried storms that would have crushed lesser men. And now, at 66, a new struggle grips at him. One more chapter of hardship that refuses to let go. If you're ready to walk through the triumphs and the tragedies, the glory and the fire, ready to honor the man who rose from nothing and reshaped the American dream with his bare hands, then please give this video a like. Let it be a small tribute to a giant whose legacy still inspires us all. When Magic Johnson's brilliant rise in basketball was suddenly halted by an unexpected HIV diagnosis more than 30 years ago, the world seemed to pause with him. At that moment, the newly married NBA superstar didn't know how much time he had left, or how this frightening news would affect the lives of his wife and their unborn baby. It was a moment filled with silence, uncertainty, and fear, an unimaginable weight for a man who had once seemed invincible. Well, you just sit there and ask yourself, what does this mean? Am I gonna die? Magic later shared with a CBS Mornings co-host Gayle King. Those words still echo with the raw honesty of someone facing an unknown future. Yet, against all odds, Magic Johnson remains HIV undetectable to this day. In an emotional and personal conversation for CBS Mornings, he spoke openly about living with the virus, the challenges he faced privately, and the legacy he continued to build long after the headlines faded. Nearly 3 decades have passed since he stood before the world and courageously revealed his diagnosis, and his life since then has been nothing short of remarkable. Today, Magic is more than a basketball legend. He is a devoted father and grandfather, a visionary entrepreneur, a generous philanthropist, and the driving force behind Magic Johnson Enterprises. Through every challenge, Cookie, his partner and source of strength, never left his side. Neither she nor their son, Irvin Johnson III, carry the virus, a blessing that brought profound relief and renewed hope. Back when he first received the diagnosis, Magic truly believed it was the end of his career and possibly his life. The fear was real, the future unknown. But what followed was a journey of resilience, love, and unbreakable spirit, a journey that continues to inspire people around the world. Magic Johnson suddenly found himself navigating an unfamiliar world, a world filled with medical terms, fears, and questions he never imagined he would face. Well, I had to really learn a lot about the illness, HIV as well as AIDS, he reflected. He understood that surviving meant learning, and learning required humility. He had to stay open-minded, unafraid to ask difficult questions, and willing to seek information from anyone who could help. It became a crash course in life, health, and uncertainty, and Magic confronted it directly. Everything changed on what should have been an ordinary day during a routine physical before the start of the 1991-92. He was in Utah for a preseason game when the call came. He needed to return home immediately. The Lakers team physician, Dr. Michael Melman insisted on speaking to him in person. And when Magic sat down and heard the words that he had tested positive for HIV, the world he knew fell apart. "I was devastated," he recalled. The shock was so overwhelming that the room seemed to fade away. He kept repeating the same question, clinging to the faint hope that there had been some kind of mistake. "Are you sure? I must have asked him 100 times, Magic said. But the answer remained the same. "We ran the test a couple of times," the doctors told him. "Yes, you do have HIV." In that moment, the strength that had carried him through championships and cheers wasn't enough. "I just lost it right there," he admitted, his voice still carrying the weight of that day. Dr. Melman tried to offer a glimmer of hope. New treatments were emerging, medications that could help him live a long, full life. It was something to hold on to, but it didn't make the hardest part any easier. The most painful moment, the one he feared above all, was the drive home. Waiting there was his wife, Cookie, the person he loved more than anything. And he would have to look into her eyes and share news that would change both of their lives forever. For Magic, the hardest part wasn't the diagnosis itself. It was the fear of breaking Cookie's heart. "It was hard because I loved her so much, and I hated to hurt her," he said, his voice still carrying the weight of that moment. When he finally found the courage to tell her, Cookie immediately understood what it meant. She knew the virus had to have entered his life through personal contact, not from medical procedures or anything else. Yet her first reaction wasn't anger. It wasn't blame. It was something far deeper. "It wasn't how he got it that mattered to me," she told CBS News. "It was, you're possibly going to die." And that overshadowed everything. Her words revealed a love rooted in compassion, not judgment. The two had known each other since their college days at Michigan State University in the 1970s. They had just married barely a month before receiving this life-changing news and had only recently learned that Cookie was pregnant. Their future, bright and filled with promise just weeks earlier, was suddenly clouded by fear and uncertainty. When their test results came back, and both Cookie and their unborn baby were HIV negative, Magic could finally breathe again. "Yes, because I was scared to death," he admitted. "I wanted to make sure she was going to be okay, the baby was going to be okay. And then I could move forward with trying to make sure I was going to be okay." The relief that washed over him in that moment was overwhelming. Cookie never left his side, but she worried for him, not just physically, but emotionally. At that time, the stigma surrounding HIV/AIDS was harsh and widespread. People were frightened, misinformed, judgmental. People weren't educated, she said. They thought you couldn't touch people, you couldn't hug people, and I didn't want people to treat us like outcasts. Because of this, she begged him not to go public, not to hold the historic November 7th, 1991 press conference, but Magic believed that honesty and awareness were more important. In the end, Cookie stood proudly beside him, in a white suit she chose on purpose. To her, the color represented a brightness and a future, a powerful symbol in the midst of fear. Magic didn't just reveal his diagnosis, he stepped into a new purpose. With the same determination he once brought to the basketball court, he launched the Magic Johnson Foundation to spread awareness, educate communities, and fight misinformation about HIV. He pushed Congress and the White House to take action, invest in research, and support those affected. He became a global symbol, not of illness, but of resilience. Yet even with this new mission, Magic's heart still longed for the game that shaped him. Retirement didn't feel right. It wasn't who he was. And the world wasn't ready to let him go either. Fans voted him onto the 1992 NBA All-Star team, even though he hadn't played a single regular season game. Then came the call to join the U.S. Olympic Dream Team, a moment that electrified the basketball world. It proved to be the right decision, Magic said. It helped people who were living with not just HIV and AIDS, but any illness to see that you can live on, you can live a productive life. Every dribble, every pass, every smile on the court became a message of hope. Still, not everyone welcomed his return. Some players were uncomfortable sharing the court with someone who was HIV positive. Even Karl Malone, a teammate on the Olympic squad, expressed concerns, especially after a game where he had been cut. The fear for some was real, fueled by misunderstanding and lack of education. But for Magic Johnson, every challenge, every doubt, every whispered worry became another barrier to break, and he was determined to keep breaking them. He remembered the pain of that moment vividly. Yeah, I got cut, Johnson admitted, his voice carrying the weight of disappointment. And I was really hurt by the backlash, because I had just been on the court with so many of the guys who didn't want me to return. It wasn't just criticism, it felt personal, and it stung deeply. The pressure, the judgment, the emotional toll, it all pushed him into stepping away once more. He retired again, believing that chapter of his life might finally be closing. But the game, the rhythm, the energy, the purpose never truly left him. Basketball had shaped his soul, and in 1996, it called him back. He remembers the moment that spark returned. I told Cookie, "You know what, maybe I should give it one more try," he said. This wasn't about proving anything to the world. It was about finishing a journey with dignity, ending it on his terms. And that's why I came back, he said softly. I wanted to walk away the right way, and I did. I ended it the way I always hoped I would. But once the cheers faded and the arena lights dimmed, a new kind of silence settled in. He would sit on the couch watching the Lakers play, his heart tugged between pride and longing. Every pass, every fast break made him think, I should be out there. It was as if his life was paused and he wasn't sure how to press play again. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Cookie walked in one day and saw him there, quiet, distant, lost in the shadows of what used to be. She felt something wasn't right, and she couldn't stay silent. She remembers leaning toward him and saying words that came straight from her heart. I'm looking at you, sitting on this couch, and this isn't the man I married. The man I married was full of drive, full of ideas, full of life. He was out there changing the world. I don't know who this is. You need to stand up and find that part of yourself again. And those words didn't just speak to him, they reached through to him. They became a turning point, pushed toward the next chapter of his life. And that honest moment, that heart-to-heart from Cookie, became a turning point that truly reshaped his life. Those words didn't just motivate him, they awakened something inside him, something powerful, something that had always been there, waiting to rise again. Today, that same fire carries him into a different kind of arena. Instead of running the fast break on the hardwood, Johnson now leads from the boardroom, taking charge with the same vision and determination he once brought to the game. As the CEO of his own company, he uses his influence and resources to pour opportunity into communities that have too often been overlooked. To him, it's not just business. It's a mission, a purpose, a promise to give back. And through it all, he continues to protect his health with unwavering discipline. His condition remains undetectable, but it still requires daily care. Every day, without fail, he takes his medication. A simple routine that once was far more demanding. Just one dose a day, he explained with quiet gratitude. It used to be 3 times a day. Now it's just once, and honestly, everything is good. There was no sadness in his voice, only strength, acceptance, and the calm confidence of a man who refuses to be defined by anything other than his resilience. The world knows the icon, the champion, the leader, the man who lit up the court like no one before him. But almost no one knows the quiet battles he fought, long before the cheers, long before the spotlight. Few understand the sting of the words that cut far deeper than any loss on the hardwood. Irvin Magic Johnson entered the world on August 14, 1959, in Lansing, Michigan, in a home where love was abundant but space was not. 10 children shared more than just bunk beds. They shared blankets, hand-me-downs, and air that sometimes felt too thin to breathe. Survival wasn't a challenge they faced now and then. It was a companion that lived with them every single day. The Johnson family wasn't just struggling, they lived shoulder to shoulder with hardship. His father, Irvin Sr., worked long, exhausting shifts at the General Motors plant. And when most people were still dreaming, he would rise again in the frozen darkness around 4 a.m. to drive a garbage truck. His mother, Christine, spent her days scrubbing school floors until her hands ached, the kind of work that steals energy long before it steals time. Magic would later say, I heard my mother sigh before I ever saw her face. That single sound told the whole story. The exhaustion, the sacrifice, the weight of a family held together by sheer will. In that house, poverty didn't come and go. It lived with them. It sat at the dinner table. It breathed in the rooms where laughter tried to stay alive, even when life made it difficult. But strangely, the harshest wounds didn't come from hunger, or cold, or sleepless nights. They came from humiliation. Sharp, unkind, unforgettable. Between 1964 and 1967, little Irvin rode beside his father on weekend trash routes. The cold metal bins numbed his fingers. But that wasn't the painful part. The real hurt came from the eyes watching him. The neighbors, the kids on porches, the ones who whispered first, then giggled, then let their teasing grow louder and sharper. They gave him a name he never asked for, a name that stung, a trash boy. They said it over and over, so many times that he could anticipate the rhythm of their laughter before it even began. And years later, he admitted, it stayed with me. That name stayed longer than any smell. Monday mornings became battlegrounds where he hoped not to be seen, not to be heard. A child wishing not for good grades or a good day, but simply for invisibility. He would try to brush the garbage smell from his coat, swiping at the fabric as if he could erase the memory, along with the odor. But the sting of embarrassment always clung harder than anything on his sleeves. He remembered being only 7 years old, asking himself in a child's trembling voice, "Oh, why does doing the right thing hurt so much?" And with every step toward school, he felt shame pressing down on him, heavier than any bag he had ever lifted beside his father. It was the kind of wound that never bleeds, the kind that hides beneath the skin and follows you into adulthood, the kind that whispers to you when the world is quiet. But there was another wound waiting ahead, a deeper one, the wound of feeling unwanted. In 1971, as integration changed the landscape of Lansing schools, young Irvin believed he would attend Sexton High, a mostly black school where he thought he could finally exhale. Finally belong. But life had a different plan. The district reassigned him to Everett High, a school that was overwhelmingly white, unwelcoming, and in many corners, openly cold. The bus carrying black students shook under the impact of thrown rocks. Windows trembled so violently that he found himself clenching his fists in silence, hoping the fear wouldn't show on his face. Inside the gym, the air felt even colder. Teammates kept the ball from him, as if it were intentional. Conversations in the locker room faded the moment he stepped in. Coaches stared past him, not unkindly, just dismissively, the way someone looks past a person they've already decided doesn't matter. And slowly, painfully, the unspoken message settled onto his shoulders like a verdict. You do not belong here. Years later, he spoke about that time with a quiet ache. Oh, there's a look people give you, the kind that tells you your presence is a mistake. That kind of loneliness didn't shout. It didn't strike fast. It tightened around him slowly, like the world was shrinking into a small circle he could never step inside. It made 14-year-old Irvin Johnson Jr. wonder if the world had already decided who he was and who he wasn't allowed to be. Yet even as those wounds closed in around him, something powerful inside him refused to dim. Something fierce, something unbreakable. Before sunrise in 1973, while the rest of Lansing slept, he slipped out of the house. The sky was still ink dark, frozen with Michigan winter air that bit into his skin. His breath turned white in the cold. But he kept going, driven by something deeper than comfort. A hunger to rise above everything that had tried to hold him down. His breath lifted into the frozen air like smoke, each exhale a reminder of how cold those mornings truly were. His hands trembled against the ball, stiff from the winter wind. But here, on this silent, empty court, the world finally felt fair. Here, no one mocked him. No one looked away. No one questioned his worth. The concrete didn't care where he came from. It didn't care about the color of his skin, the struggle in his home, or the echo of that old nickname still lodged painfully in his memory. The court accepted him fully, fiercely, without hesitation. Without hesitation. So he gave it everything he had. Every insult, every cold stare, every moment he cried quietly into his pillow. He poured all of it into the rhythm of the ball. Dribble, step, pass, again and again, until the sun began to stretch across the sky. His no-look passes weren't born from showmanship. They were born from survival, from the desperate need to create a world where someone like him mattered. Under those pale, early morning skies of the 1970s, a fragile belief began to glow inside him. Maybe he had value beyond the hard work his father did. Maybe he could rise above the humiliation that tried to define him. Maybe, just maybe, he could climb so high that no one would ever dare laugh at him again. In that icy dawn, long before arenas would thunder at the mention of his name, the fire that would one day astonish the entire world was already burning. His greatness didn't come from comfort. It came from the cold. It came from places so harsh and so unforgiving that it's a miracle he emerged from them at all. The first sparks of his rise didn't flicker underneath bright lights or roaring crowds. They were hammered into existence through doubt, through isolation, through the unrelenting fight to prove he was more than the world tried to tell him he was. By the early 1970s, Irvin Johnson Jr., already stretching toward the sky at nearly 6'7", was beginning to grow into the powerful frame the world would someday admire. But height couldn't protect him from reality. Lansing winters sliced through thin jackets, and every walk to school felt like trudging through a world determined to remind him of his limits. Cold wasn't just outside. It was inside me too, he would later confess. Yet destiny has a way of hiding inside suffering. And his destiny ignited at 15, on a night when pain, longing, and raw, untamed talent collided in one electric burst, a moment that would change everything. That night, in the dim glow of a small high school gym, where the air carried the smell of dust, worn bleachers, and years of forgotten games, something extraordinary stirred. It wasn't just a teenager running up and down the court. It was as if his body was being moved by a force far greater than muscle, speed, or youth. 36 points, 18 rebounds, 16 assists. Numbers that didn't look like they belonged to a kid still figuring out life. They felt like the kind of numbers you read about in legends, the kind that hint at a phenomenon just beginning to open its eyes. The local reporter sat courtside, staring at the stat sheet with disbelief. His eyebrows slowly lifted, and in a breath he barely meant to release, he whispered a word that would follow this young man for the rest of his life: magic. When Irvin heard it, the world seemed to pause. Huh? Magic, he'd later recall, stopped me in my tracks. Part of me lit up inside, but another part of me wondered if I could ever live up to something that big. Even in triumph, doubt reached for him, reminding him that success often comes wrapped in questions no one sees. He ran home that night, bursting through the door, eager to tell his mother, Christine, the anchor who steadied the family through every harsh winter and every setback. She listened, touched his cheek the way only a mother can, and said softly, "Only God performs magic." And suddenly the nickname felt heavier. Who was he to carry a name that bold? What if people laughed? What if he never rose high enough to deserve it? But the world didn't laugh. America embraced him. And magic became both the crown placed on his head and the weight resting on his shoulders. Yet while destiny was shaping him, life was chiseling him too. And nothing cut deeper than what happened in 1976. Reggie Chastain, his closest friend, the teammate who believed in him when others shut him out, the one person who saw him not through labels or expectations, but through genuine friendship, was taken in a tragic car accident at only 18. Magic was 17. The phone call shattered him. It felt like the air left my body, he later said. He was the first person who truly believed in me. Reggie wasn't just a friend. He was the safe place Magic had found in a world that rarely offered him one. The one who stayed after practice when others walked past him. The one who cheered for every brilliant play, even when no one else bothered to look. His loss carved a scar that would never fully fade. Reggie was the one who laughed with him in empty gyms, when the bleachers were silent and no spotlight existed to confirm their dreams. Magic never forgot one late afternoon, another practice where not a single teammate passed him the ball. He sat quietly, frustration burning behind his eyes, when Reggie walked over, draped an arm across his shoulders, and said with a smile that carried absolute belief, "Belief, you're a special man. I see it, and one day, they will too." Losing him wasn't just a heartbreak. It was an earthquake, one that cracked the ground beneath Magic's feet. For weeks afterward, Magic found himself standing in front of Reggie's empty locker. His fingers would trace the cold metal door, and in a whisper only the walls could hear, he'd say, "I'm still here. I'm not done." He would walk past the court where they once stayed until the sun sank below the trees, hearing the faint echo of Reggie's laugh carried by the evening wind. That grief didn't crush him. It reforged him. Every tear sharpened his purpose. Every moment of silence hardened his resolve. And so, when Everett High claimed the Michigan State Championship the following year, Magic didn't dance or shout. He simply lifted the trophy toward the rafters, slowly, reverently, as though offering it to the friend who deserved to be standing beside him. It wasn't a celebration. It was a promise kept, a vow fulfilled. Then came the next climb. Michigan State University, 1977. When Magic stepped onto campus with a worn duffel bag slung over his shoulder, he carried far more than clothes. He carried every cruel whisper from the streets of Lansing. Every freezing morning when he practiced alone at 5 a.m., every time Reggie told him he mattered. Every moment he had learned to get back up when the world pushed him down. Practices under coach Judd Heathcote were blisteringly tough. Relentless drills, exhausting film sessions, pressure that made other players break long before the season even began. But Magic had survived far colder rooms and far deeper silence than any gym could offer. Pain had already been his teacher, loss had already been his coach, and slowly the world began to sense that something rare was unfolding. This wasn't just another talented kid. This was a force being refined by hunger, loss, and an unwavering desire to honor the friend who believed in him first. By 1979, as the world braced for the legendary NCAA Finals showdown against Larry Bird, Magic wasn't playing for applause or newspaper headlines. He was playing for destiny. For the boy who once shot hoops alone in icy darkness. For the friend whose empty locker still echoed in his heart. For every wound that shaped him. And under those blinding championship lights with an entire nation watching, he didn't just win, he took command. He turned the court into a kingdom that night. Every step, every pass, every smile carried the fire that had been burning since those icy mornings in Lansing. And at last, America saw what the empty playgrounds and forgotten gyms of Michigan had witnessed for years. Greatness, true greatness, had not been shaped by comfort or privilege. It had been forged through struggle, through doubt, through poverty, through ridicule, and through one loss so deep it left a scar that never fully closed. Magic didn't shine because life was gentle. He shone because life pushed him to the edge again and again. And still, he refused to fall. He rose every time, stronger, sharper, brighter. The world had tried to break him. But now the world would see what happens when a wounded soul refuses to stay small. When pain becomes purpose. So when Magic Johnson entered the NBA in 1979, just 20 years old, he wasn't stepping into fame. He was stepping straight into a storm. A whirlwind of expectations that could crush even the toughest adult, let alone a kid barely old enough to order a drink. Hollywood glittered around him, but the lights didn't feel like celebration. They felt like interrogation. People think the lights feel warm, he once said. Sometimes they burn. The veterans didn't make it easier. Some whispered that he was too cheerful, too different, too youthful to survive this league of hardened men. Calmness took shots at him. They mocked his smile, the one thing that had carried him through years of hardship. Critics sneered that his dazzling no-look passes were nothing more than showy stunts, flash without substance. But beneath all that noise, the boy from Lansing still lived. The boy who once walked to school with his head down, praying no one would call him a trash boy. The boy who knew what cruelty felt like long before the cameras ever found him. I knew what it was like to be laughed at, he later confessed. So I played like I'd never let anyone laugh at me again. And here was the truth the world didn't yet understand. Every insult sharpened him. Every doubt fueled him. Every sneer added one more log to the fire inside his chest. Every glare he faced shaped him. Every doubt pushed him further. And in trying to restrain his rise, the world unknowingly lit the spark of a revolution. That spark didn't wait. It erupted, faster and brighter than anyone was prepared for. In the 1980 NBA Finals, the Los Angeles Lakers were holding on to their championship hopes by a thread. Then disaster struck. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, their foundation, their calm in every storm, went down with a painful ankle injury. The entire franchise felt the ground shift. Their leader was out. Their future was suddenly uncertain. And then there was Magic. He had never played center. He had never been asked to carry the entire weight of a team, a city, a legacy. But as the Lakers boarded the plane to Philadelphia for Game 6, something unforgettable happened. Magic walked straight to the front and sat down in Kareem's seat. A simple gesture, but one so bold, so fearless, that it stunned the entire cabin into silence. "I've got this," he told his teammates. And he meant it. What followed became one of the most legendary performances in basketball history. Under the crushing pressure of a championship night, a 20-year-old rookie transformed into a force the sport had never seen. He scored 42 points, grabbed 15 rebounds, handed out 7 assists, stole the ball 3 times, and played all 5 positions. Every single one. He didn't just help the Lakers win a title. He announced himself to the world. He stepped onto the court a kid and walked off with a crown. But behind the confetti and the cheers, there was a truth he kept hidden. I was smiling, he admitted years later. But inside my legs were shaking. Greatness had arrived early for him. Brilliant, demanding, and unforgiving. As the 1980s roared into motion, Magic became the heartbeat of Showtime. He wasn't just a player, he was rhythm, joy, and electricity wrapped into one. The Lakers became more than a team. They became a spectacle, a weekly event that made basketball feel alive in ways it never had before. Magic averaged over 11 assists per game, delivered 138 career triple-doubles, and threaded passes so unreal. They felt like moments of pure instinct, almost spiritual in their beauty. But every miracle came with a cost. The NBA schedule was relentless. 82 games, endless flights that stole rest, cameras that never stopped watching. Pressure that followed him everywhere. Some nights, the pain hit him so hard he could barely move. His back would lock up until he was forced to lie flat on the cold locker room floor, staring at the ceiling, whispering into the empty air, "Lord, just let me stand tomorrow." His body pleaded for rest. His knees throbbed, and the smile the world adored slowly became his shield, an armor he wore even when he was breaking inside. Even within his own locker room, not everyone understood him. Some teammates envied the spotlight that followed him, spotlight he never asked for, spotlight he often wished he could escape. On the court, rivals targeted him relentlessly. Elbows, shoves, hits from every angle. Bruises spread across his ribs like battle marks. And off the court, the weight grew heavier. He had signed the largest contract the NBA had ever seen. 25 years, $25 million. And instead of comfort, it filled him with fear. For a kid who used to count pennies for bus fare, he said softly, "And that number scared me more than any defender ever did." And in hotel rooms, after victories that shook entire arenas, he often sat alone, surrounded not by cheers, but by a silence so deep he could hear his own heartbeat. "A people loved Magic," he once said, "but they forgot about lonely." Yet through pressure, through pain, through nights when the world felt too heavy, he kept rising. Higher, brighter, fiercer. Showtime became a dynasty, and Magic became its architect, its heartbeat, its compass, its soul. 5 NBA championships, 3 MVP awards, 9 trips to the NBA final, 12 All-Star selections. He led the league in assists 4 times. He recorded seasons with more than 700 assists. He lifted the Lakers' popularity and value to heights the franchise had never dreamed of. His play didn't just entertain, it lifted spirits. His joy was contagious, his light overwhelming. It was a gift he shared with the world, because he remembered too well what it was like to grow up surrounded by shadows. By the late 1980s, he was no longer just a superstar. He was America's spark, its pulse, its showman, its champion. Champion! Crowds roared his name. Children studied his passes on playgrounds trying to recreate his magic. Broadcasters called him the most captivating force the sport had ever seen. He stood at the very top of the basketball world, celebrated, unstoppable, almost untouchable. Almost untouchable. But even as the country embraced him, something unseen was moving toward him. A quiet fracture beneath the surface. A shadow that didn't rush, didn't shout, didn't warn. It simply crept closer, patient and unrelenting. And as the decade blazed at its brightest, Magic shining at the peak of human triumph, something dark was already approaching. Silent as a heartbeat, closer than he could ever imagine. The darkness didn't arrive quietly. It struck like lightning. On November 7th, 1991, at just 32 years old and still towering above the sport he had reshaped, Magic Johnson stood before a wall of cameras with a calmness that didn't match the storm inside him. Reporters leaned forward, expecting another routine update from the Lakers' biggest star. Instead, they witnessed a legend lower his gaze for a single, heavy heartbeat and speak 12 words that sent shockwaves across the nation. "Because of the HIV virus that I have, I will retire today." Pens slipped out of hands. Camera operators shook. A collective gasp tore through the room, like the earth itself had split open. Magic had survived roaring arenas, fierce rivalries, and championship pressure. What made that silence even harsher was the time period. In 1991, HIV wasn't understood. It was feared. Medicine didn't have clear answers. Myths screamed louder than truth. To the public, it wasn't a diagnosis. It was a sentence. And so the shock didn't simply spread. It ignited panic. Ignited panic. News anchors stumbled through their words. ESPN cut off mid-broadcast. Radios crackled with disbelief. Barbershops fell silent. Factory lines halted. Locker rooms across the league froze. The man who once made basketball feel like a celebration of life was suddenly seen as something else. Something misunderstood, something many were afraid of. Headlines struck like blades. Commentators questioned if he should ever play again. A few players whispered about whether they would even share the same court. A name once shining bright with Showtime was suddenly tied to a virus the world knew too little about and judged far too quickly. Beneath all of the noise was the burden he shouldered in private. He knew fame had once led him into choices that carried consequences. He knew moments of being young, carefree, and unthinking had caught up to him. "I thought I was invincible," he later admitted. "I wasn't living the way a man should." Inside the Lakers' walls, the devastation reached even deeper. Teammates who once danced beside him in victory parades now stood frozen in uncertainty, their hands caught somewhere between reaching out and pulling away. People who had shared locker rooms, triumphs, and countless bus rides with him didn't know what to say anymore. Trainers paused before approaching him. Coaches walked toward him with eyes full of worry, hearts heavy with confusion. Inside the locker room that had once felt like his throne, his jersey hung untouched, swaying gently like a flag lowered in quiet mourning. Only days before, he had been the beating heart of a dynasty, a symbol of joy and brilliance. But now, he felt pushed to the edges of the very world that had once embraced him. "I thought basketball would always be there for me," he would later admit. Suddenly, painfully, it wasn't. And the wound wasn't about losing applause or attention. The real pain was losing purpose. Losing the game that had lifted him from hardship, from doubt, from loneliness. In that empty space, he came face to face with a truth he never expected. People are rarely afraid of what is dangerous. They are afraid of what they do not understand. Yet even in the storm, he refused to stop fighting. In early 1992, when the NBA extended an invitation to the All-Star Game, he stepped back under the bright lights, determined to show the world that fear would not write his final chapter. But victory came with thorns. Some players quietly protested his return to it. Talk shows filled the air with anxious voices. Newspapers questioned the league's decision. And still, he answered with brilliance. 25 points. 12-star MVP. An arena roaring like it was witnessing a second sunrise. But ignorance doesn't disappear overnight, and prejudice takes even longer to fade. When he attempted comebacks in 1992, and later in 1996, the whispers trailed behind him like unwanted shadows. Should he be here? Here! Is it safe? Every hallway, every tunnel beneath the arena seats carried the sting of being doubted by the very sport he had once illuminated with joy. Then came the hardest chapter of all. In the 1993-94 season, he tried to remain close to the game by stepping in as the Lakers' head coach. It should have been a triumphant return, a hero guiding the next generation. But the moment unraveled before his eyes. The roster struggled under the weight of expectations. Losses piled up. And slowly, painfully, the players stopped seeing him as a leader. To some, he looked like a reminder of an era slipping away. After just 16 games, the dream collapsed, leaving him with another wound from the game he loved so deeply. A man who once ruled the hardwood now found himself standing outside the very world he had helped create. The noise, the lights, the glory, all of it continued forward without him. "I thought I could find myself again," he confessed. But the game had already drifted on, moving like time, never pausing long enough for anyone to catch it. And in that quiet, painful realization, raw, humbling, and impossible to ignore, Magic Johnson confronted a truth sharper than any loss he had ever endured. Greatness can lift you to the mountaintop, but it can't protect you from life's storms. The real measure of a person is revealed in how they rise when the world steps away. His fall had been harsh, swift, public, and unforgiving. But what most of the world never saw was the spark that refused to die inside him. Oh, when Magic Johnson lost the game that had raised him, he did not lose the spirit that kept him fighting all those years. In the aftermath of 1991, when headlines treated his diagnosis like a final curtain and society let fear build invisible walls around him, Magic chose a path few would ever dare take. He decided to rebuild, brick by brick, day by day, not by asking for sympathy, not by waiting for someone to hand him a fresh start, but by creating a new world from the ashes of the one he had lost. And so he returned to the very places America had turned its back on. Throughout 1993 and 1994, long before anyone would think to call him a business giant, Magic walked through the forgotten corners of Los Angeles alone. Oh, he passed cracked sidewalks, boarded up shops, old movie theaters sinking under decades of dust and silence. They reminded me of where I came from, he said later. He wasn't chasing money. He was chasing purpose. He was searching for the missing pieces of himself in those quiet, broken streets. And there, in the overlooked neighborhoods filled with history and hope, he discovered something grief had failed to take from him: direction. But purpose always demands struggle. And rebuilding anything, especially a community, always begins with hearing the word no. So when he carried his first proposals into banks across the mid-1990s, plans to revive theaters, restore small businesses, bring life back to blocks the city had forgotten, he wasn't simply rejected. He was brushed aside, ignored, dismissed without hesitation. Oh, these neighborhoods aren't worth the investment, executives repeated, as if the fate of entire communities could be summed up with a single sentence. One banker even let out a quiet, mocking smirk. To stick to basketball, he said, as if the world had room for Magic Johnson only in one place. Another executive shook his head. People in those neighborhoods don't drink premium coffee. Magic would later admit, every no felt like someone trying to drag me back into the shadows I'd spent my whole life fighting to escape. But instead of walking away, he kept moving forward, into the half-empty shops, into the forgotten theaters, into the heart of communities that had been ignored for far too long. He sat in torn seats, listening to parents, store owners, and young people who felt invisible too. He closed his eyes and imagined projectors shining again, families lining up again, hope filling the space where dust had settled. And with no clear path, no corporate safety net, and not a single promise of success, he placed his bet on the only resource he believed in completely: himself. The renovated Baldwin Hills Theater that followed wasn't glamorous or covered in gold. It wasn't designed to impress Wall Street, but it had something far more important. It had soul. And it belonged to him, to the community, to everyone who still believed in second chances. When the theater became alive again, buzzing with families, teenagers, workers, and laughter, Magic realized something powerful. Sometimes the first victory after losing everything is simply proving you can rise again. Then came the spark that would set everything ablaze. In the late 1990s, Howard Schultz, the visionary behind Starbucks, came with a question no one in corporate America had thought to ask. Can Starbucks thrive in neighborhoods the country has overlooked? Magic didn't pause. Absolutely, he said. You just don't know my community yet. He invested millions of his own hard-earned savings, money he could not afford to waste, knowing every dollar was a risk, every decision a leap without a safety harness. Success wasn't promised. And failure, if it came, would echo everything the critics always said about him. But he walked forward with faith, not fear. And the results stunned the nation. His Starbucks stores didn't just succeed. They changed the mold. They exploded with life. Lines stretched around corners. Families and students filled the cafes, not only for coffee, but for something far deeper, a feeling of belonging, of safety, of being valued. Howard Schultz later admitted, "A Magic saw what we didn't. He saw possibility where we saw doubt." And when Magic sold his Starbucks stake in 2010 for $75 million in cash, it wasn't luck. It was the earned reward of a man who dared to believe in people, even when the world refused to believe in him. From there, Magic Johnson Enterprises rose into a billion-dollar powerhouse, revitalizing streets, creating opportunities, empowering entire neighborhoods, and expanding into Equitrust, a financial firm managing more than $14 billion in assets. And then came the crowning moment. In 2012, Magic joined a group to purchase the Los Angeles Dodgers for nearly $2 billion, one of the most iconic ownership moves in sports history. Fans cried, seeing him step onto the field, not as a point guard, but as an owner. Symbol of rebirth. His journey didn't stop there. He added ownership stakes in the Los Angeles Sparks, and in 2023, the Washington Commanders, a record-shattering $6.05 billion NFL deal that marks yet another historic milestone. A boy once dismissed as the trash boy, a young man once pushed away from the game he loved because of fear and misunderstanding, would one day sit at the highest tables in American sports. By 2025, Magic Johnson's net worth soared past $1. $5 billion, a living reminder that a life can fall apart and still rise higher than anyone ever imagined. When Magic looks back, he often says, "Basketball made me Magic, but losing everything made man." Those words carry the weight of someone who didn't climb his way to the top through applause or trophies alone. His empire wasn't built from cheers. It was built from rejection, discipline, courage, and a belief forged in the darkest nights. A belief that even a life cracked open by hardship can be rebuilt into something stronger, something greater, something unshakable. And from that belief, Magic Johnson didn't just rise, he ascended. Yet even with time, success, and unimaginable fortune, the old wounds inside Magic Johnson's heart have never fully faded. Long before arenas thundered his name, long before the bright lights, the championships, and the sprawling business empire, there was just Irvin, a hopeful young man with a shy smile, searching for a place where he truly belonged. And in those early fragile years, he found that place in Melissa Mitchell. She was a calm warmth in human form, someone who saw him before the world ever did. Someone who believed in him when he was nothing more than a tall, skinny dreamer with oversized hands, oversized ambition, and no guarantee that life would make space for either. Their love wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't shaped for headlines or storybooks. It was simple, steady, and real. Two young hearts learning what it meant to lean on someone in a world that wasn't always kind. Their love was soft and unhurried, built not on grand gestures, but on quiet conversations, shared laughter, and the gentle comfort of being understood without needing to explain. It was the kind of bond two young souls create when they finally feel seen in a world that has so often looked past them. For Irvin, who had spent much of his childhood pushing back against loneliness, Melissa became the first place where he could truly exhale. With her, the world felt lighter, kinder, like life was finally offering him a corner of peace just for himself. But destiny is rarely kind to young love. As 1979 and 1980 unfolded, Irvin's world surged forward with a force that no heart, especially a young one, could match. The glow of a promising rookie season quickly turned into a national spotlight. Camera flashes replaced quiet afternoons. The days blurred into long flights, new cities, endorsement deals, and expectations stacked higher than any 20-year-old could reasonably understand. And while Irvin was being swept into a future larger than he had ever imagined, Melissa remained rooted in the life he was rapidly outgrowing. Their worlds didn't collide. They simply drifted apart. Phone calls that once lasted an hour faded into brief check-ins. Plans to visit became soft promises to try. The rhythm of their hearts, once perfectly aligned, slowly shifted into different tempos. Success arrived so quickly that it outpaced the boy he still was. Well, success came so fast, it outgrew the boy I still was. Magic would later say, it was more than a reflection. It was an apology carried quietly through the years. Then came 1981, a year filled with beauty and contradiction. Melissa gave birth to Andre, their son, a child who carried Magic's bright smile and the early threads of his legacy in the curl of his tiny fingers. The first time Magic held him, something inside him changed. There was love, fear, emotions pouring in all at once, overwhelming and humbling. But love, no matter how deep, cannot erase unpreparedness. Magic was just 21, standing between global fame and private responsibility, trying to manage a life moving faster than he had a chance to grow into. I didn't know how to be a father yet, he would confess years later. It wasn't an excuse, it was a wound, and as his fame intensified, his schedule swallowed more and more of him, leaving Melissa to carry the quiet weight of motherhood alone. She raised their son with steady grace and unshakable strength, watching from a distance as the man she once shared dreams with became a symbol claimed by the world. Their story did not end with anger, nor with it faded in the quiet, bittersweet way young love so often does, two good hearts gently drifting apart, not because they stopped caring, but because life pulled them in different directions. Time, opportunity, and impossible schedules did what neither of them ever wanted. They separated a bond that once felt unbreakable. But the wound Magic carried was never about losing the relationship. It was the weight of knowing there were moments with his son that he would never be able to reclaim. Birthdays missed, first words unheard, early fears he wasn't there to comfort, little triumphs he didn't witness. The tiny, irreplaceable threads that shape a child's earliest world, threads he would forever wish he had helped weave. That regret stayed with him, quiet, steady, and unshakable. Yet life, in its unexpected mercy, offered him something rare, a second chance. Andre grew into a remarkable young man, grounded, thoughtful, compassionate, and as he stepped into adulthood, father and son slowly found their way back to each other. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't simple, but it was intentional. It was purposeful. It was earned. Together, they rebuilt the bridge that distance had once broken. Today, Andre stands proudly at his father's side, not simply as family, but as a respected executive helping guide Magic Johnson Enterprises. He is living proof of healing shaped by patience, humility, and love. In their reconciliation lies one of the most powerful truths of Magic Johnson's journey. Even legends falter. Even icons carry quiet regrets. But a man is not defined by the mistakes he makes. He is defined by the courage with which he rises to repair them. And by choosing to love harder the second time, Magic Johnson proved that some of the greatest victories are not won under bright lights or roaring crowds. They are won in the quiet, determined work at becoming the person you once wished you had been. Love rarely follows a perfect timeline. For Magic, it arrived at a moment when his heart was still tender from loss and change. Only months after his young relationship with Melissa Mitchell had faded beneath the weight of rising fame, Irvin found himself slowly drawn towards someone whose presence felt different.
Softer, steadier, grounding.
Her name was Cookie Kelly. She didn't fall in love with the rising star the world was beginning to chase. She fell in love with the humble, hopeful young man hidden beneath the spotlight. The Irvin no camera ever truly captured. They met at Michigan State in the late 1970s, two students with big dreams and even bigger uncertainties, navigating life with nothing but ambition and youth on their side. What began as simple friendship, late-night campus walks, shared cafeteria meals, gentle conversations echoing down quiet dorm hallways, slowly grew into something deeper, something neither of them saw coming. Cookie noticed the boy still carrying old scars from childhood, still fighting to believe he belonged anywhere at all. And in Cookie, Magic didn't just find comfort, he found home. Their love unfolded in brief, stolen moments of calm, tucked between the chaos of Magic's rising fame. Through grueling travel schedules, through the dizzying rush of early stardom, through long stretches of distance that sometimes made them feel like strangers, Cookie remained the quiet center in the middle of Magic's storm. They drifted, they reconnected, they rebuilt. Two young hearts learning, stumbling, and choosing each other again and again, even when life made it hard. After nearly a decade of on and off chapters, they finally felt brave enough to write a lasting one. On September 14th, 1991, Magic and Cookie stood before their families, their friends, and their faith, promising forever. They were glowing, relieved, hopeful, believing that after so many years of uncertainty, life was finally granting them the peace they had fought so long to find. They decorated their new home with the excitement of two people finally building a shared world. They dreamed out loud. They whispered about the future. They held plans only newlyweds understand. And when Cookie discovered she was expecting their first child, it felt as though joy had bloomed in every corner of their house. But fate is rarely gentle when happiness is at its brightest. Only 7 weeks after the wedding, Magic walked through their front door carrying a truth so heavy, it nearly brought him to his knees. He had tested positive for HIV. And in 1991, long before medical breakthroughs, long before public understanding, HIV was not just feared, it was misunderstood, judged, and spoken about like a shadow people were too afraid to even name. For a newly married, pregnant wife, it wasn't simply devastating news. It felt like the sound of a life collapsing in real time. Cookie later said, "It felt like the ground disappeared beneath my feet. She didn't know if she was infected." She didn't know if their baby was safe. Overnight, the soft glow of their honeymoon transformed into sleepless nights' whispered prayers and a quiet terror that sat with them in every moment. They faced days where the simplest breath felt heavy with uncertainty. Magic barely slept. Barely slept. Cookie barely breathed. At 2 in the morning, they clung to each other on the living room couch, listening to the silence, hoping it would offer some kind of miracle. And beyond their walls, a world hungry for headlines erupted. Reporters hammered at their gate. Strangers spread hurtful assumptions they didn't understand and didn't care to question. And through it all, Cookie faced a storm of public judgment. Accusations that she stayed for attention or money. Narratives as cruel as they were untrue. She saw the man she loved, frightened, broken, trying to hold himself together. She stayed because love is not built on convenience. She stayed because she believed their marriage was worth fighting for, even when the world insisted it was already lost. When the test results finally came, Cookie negative, the baby negative. The relief was so powerful, it felt like life itself had been handed back to them. They held each other and cried until their bodies had nothing left to give. But surviving the diagnosis did not mean the storm had passed. It meant they had to learn how to live inside it. Magic spiraled through waves of guilt and grief, haunted by fear. Fear of leaving the world too soon. Fear of hurting the woman he adored. Fear that his unborn child, Edge, would grow up with only stories of who he once was. And Cookie carried her own battles. Exhaustion, anxiety, the weight of protecting her child while shielding her husband from a world that could be painfully unkind. Together, they stood in the middle of a hurricane, fragile, frightened, but still holding on to each other. Some nights, they slept back to back, too afraid to give their fears a voice, terrified that saying them aloud. But slowly, piece by fragile piece, they began to find their way, through doctor visits, through counseling sessions, through quiet moments where their hearts broke together instead of breaking apart. The Cookie's strength became the steady anchor, holding their home in place. Magic's vulnerability, raw and unguarded, became the bridge that led them back to closeness again. And the vows they had spoken just weeks earlier, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, stopped being ceremonial phrases. They became the foundation on which their entire world rested. Magic would later reflect, "I don't know if I deserved her then, but I grew into the man she believed I could be." And Cookie, with a courage the world still doesn't fully understand, became the heartbeat of their family. She didn't stay because it was easy. She stayed because love, real love, is the kind that digs its heels in when everything else is falling apart. Together they endured, not because their marriage was perfect, but because they kept choosing each other again and again, even when countless voices expected them to break. That was the quiet miracle of their love, a reminder that commitment isn't measured by the sunny days, but by the hands we refuse to let go of when the storms come. It's measured by the strength two hearts can build when they decide that walking through the darkness together is better than walking through the light alone. And some storms don't break a man from the outside. Some storms strike through the people he loves. Just when Magic Johnson believed he had already survived every battle life could throw at him. Public fear, a collapsing career, the painful climb to rebuild an empire. He discovered a truth far more devastating. The deepest wounds were not the ones carved into his own life, but the ones he watched carve themselves into the lives of his children. Because no matter how powerful a man becomes, no matter how many arenas cheer his name, nothing tests the soul quite like the moment you watch your child step into a world that may not welcome them with open arms. And nothing shakes a parent deeper than the night when your child's life, their future, their very spirit, seems to hang by a single fragile thread. The first real storm in Magic's life didn't arrive with thunder or warning. It crept in quietly, soft, honest, and life-changing. It's a truth that would reshape his family forever. In 2013, his son Edge, born in 1992, the baby he once held with trembling hands in a hospital room overflowing with hope, sat across from him with a truth that required more courage than any championship moment. With steady breaths and a heart fighting for freedom, Edge shared who he truly was, not as rebellion, not as defiance, but with the gentle, vulnerable honesty of someone choosing authenticity over fear. Magic had always seen himself as a loving, present father. But in that moment, time paused. And suddenly, every memory he had buried deep from his own youth resurfaced. The harsh words, the cold stares, the ache of being different in a world that can be unkind. The second it senses someone's spirit being tested, his fear wasn't about who his son was. It was about the pain the world might try to place on his shoulders. I didn't want Edge to ever feel the kind of hurt I remembered, he admitted later. I just didn't want life to wound my boy. Before he could speak, Cookie gently placed her hand on his arm. A simple touch, steady and warm enough to calm a hurricane inside him. "This is our son," she whispered. "I'll love him first, understand the rest later." That single sentence became the turning point, the moment their family stepped into a new chapter. And so Magic moved forward. Not perfectly. Not instantly, but with determination. He listened. He asked questions. He tried. He began unlearning old ideas shaped by the world he grew up in. He replaced instinct with compassion, fear with understanding, hesitation with love. And over time, beautifully, the distance between father and son began to melt away. Years later, Magic would reflect with quiet pride, saying, "Edge didn't just come out. He helped me grow up," Magic would later say. And today, their bond stands as one of the strongest testaments to how far he has come. Not the evolution of an athlete, not the evolution of a global icon, but the evolution of a father, learning to open his heart wider than ever before. But the second storm, it did not arrive quietly. Didn't tiptoe in with truth. Like a flash of lightning, sudden, unforgiving, and cold. In December of 2018, Magic's daughter, Elisa, then in her early 20s, was staying at a friend's home in Los Angeles when armed intruders forced their way inside. What unfolded lasted only minutes on the clock, yet for her family, it felt like time stretched into something unbearable. Elisa bolted into the night barefoot, the winter pavement slicing and stinging beneath her feet. Her heartbeat roared in her ears, louder than sirens, louder than footsteps, louder than every instinct screaming at her to keep running. In those terrifying seconds, she wasn't the daughter of a legend. She wasn't surrounded by wealth, by prestige, or by anything that could shield her. She was simply a frightened young woman begging for another moment, another breath. When Magic's phone rang, something inside him snapped. A kind of fear he had never known surged through him, raw, overwhelming, primal. Hearing Elisa's trembling voice on the other end, hearing her trying to steady herself even as she shook uncontrollably, shattered every protective layer he had ever wrapped around his heart. "I've never felt so helpless," he admitted. "My entire life, I fought my battles with my own hands. But this was a danger I couldn't stand between her and." For days afterward, he replayed her breathless words in his mind. Each replay twisted deeper, a reminder of how close he had come to losing her. And when he finally reached her that night, she was barefoot, drained, mascara streaked down her cheeks, yet alive. Magic pulled her into his arms with the kind of grip only a parent understands. The grip of someone holding the most irreplaceable gift life has ever placed in their hands. And in that embrace, a truth washed over him. A truth no championship, no contract, no empire had ever taught him. Everything he had built, every trophy, every accolade, every achievement meant nothing compared to the safety of his children. And the hardest truth of all, even a father's love, as powerful as it is, cannot protect his children from every shadow the world casts. Sometimes the most you can do is be there, arms open, when they run out of breath. But these storms, Edge courageous truth, Elisa's night of terror, did not break the Johnson family. They reforged them. They reshaped their strength. They carved resilience into their foundation. They taught Magic that true greatness isn't counted in points on a scoreboard, trophies in a case, or the size of a bank account. True greatness reveals itself in the moments when the world threatens the people you cherish most, and you show up anyway. They taught him humility, patience, and a deeper, quieter courage than anything basketball ever demanded. My children saved me, Magic reflected. They taught me how to love better. And maybe that is the quiet, glowing truth of Magic Johnson's life story. Basketball gave him fame. Success gave him recognition. But fatherhood gave him wisdom. The storms that entered his family's life didn't come to shatter them. They came to uncover the strength that was already there. They arrived to reveal bonds that no pressure, no danger, no fear could break. And in the end, the man who once stunned the world with no-look passes and impossible plays discovered the greatest truth of all, the most valuable treasure a man can ever hold. His family. Not success, not applause, not the empire he builds, but the hands he reaches for when everything else falls away. Yet even with all he had learned, nothing could prepare Magic for the kind of loss that steals the breath from a man and leaves silence where laughter once lived. Few losses cut as deeply as the ones that dim a light you believed would shine forever. And for Magic Johnson, the greatest heartbreaks of his life didn't come from injuries, bad games, or public storms. They came from losing the two men who helped shape him long before a camera ever turned his way. One gave him his name, the other gave him his purpose. And when each of them was gone, something inside Magic grew still, so still that not even the roar of a crowded arena could reach it. In 2023, another life-changing storm arrived. The loss of the man who taught him dignity by living it every single day, Irvin Johnson Sr., passed away after a long, draining battle with illness. This was the man who woke before sunrise, the man who hauled heavy trash bins so his family could eat, the man who returned home carrying the scent of diesel and metal, but never carrying complaints, only pride, only responsibility, only love. Magic could still close his eyes and remember those early morning rides, sitting beside his father in the cold truck cab, watching him lift weight after weight with a calmness that felt unbreakable, a strength that made young Magic believe his father was the closest thing to invincible. So, my father never complained, Magic would say softly. He just worked, loved, and led by example. But in those final months, the man Magic had always seen as unbreakable began to fade. The strength that once seemed endless slowly slipped away. Magic found himself holding the same hands that had once wrapped around his own. The hands that showed him how to dribble a basketball, how to work hard, how to stand tall. Only now, those hands were thinner. They trembled. They carried years of wear and exhaustion. There were no cheering crowds. There were no cheering crowds. No cameras documenting the moment. No championship brightness to soften the blow. Just a son sitting beside the strongest man he had ever known, watching him grow weaker day by day. And when his father finally took his last breath, the world seemed to tilt. The compass he had followed since childhood had gone still. A silence fell over Magic that he had never known before, a silence heavy enough to bend the spine of even the mightiest man. In that quiet, life-altering moment, Magic realized something he had never understood until then. Grief doesn't roar. It doesn't storm through the room demanding attention. Grief settles, it empties, it reshapes you softly, painfully from the inside out. And for the first time in his life, he had to step forward without the man who had always walked beside him. But grief has a way of opening old doors, doors you thought you had already walked through. Long before losing his father, Magic had already endured another heartbreaking farewell, the kind of loss that splits your life into a before and an after. He had already said goodbye to Dr. Jerry Buss, the man who shaped his adult life as deeply as Irvin Johnson Sr. shaped his childhood. To the world, Dr. Buss was the visionary owner of the Los Angeles Lakers, a mastermind who changed the landscape of basketball forever. But to Magic, he was something far more personal. He was the man who saw something extraordinary in a 20-year-old rookie who wasn't even sure of himself yet. The man who pulled him aside and said, "You're the future of this franchise." The voice who defended him through storms, who taught him business, who told him he could build empires long before Magic ever believed that could be true. And when illness dimmed the light in Dr. Buss' eyes, Magic sat beside him. Just as he would years later with his own father, he held his hand. He shared stories. They laughed softly, both trying to hide the fear neither one wanted to admit. And when Dr. Buss finally slipped away, Magic stepped outside into the morning air and whispered a truth that shattered him. "I lost the man who made me believe I could be more." Losing one father wounds you. Losing two, it changes your gravity. It shifts the world beneath your feet. Oh. And in the months that followed, Magic found himself visited by memories. Some memories warm the soul, others cut deep, yet all of them stay with you forever. For Magic, the lessons of two men shaped the very map of his father showed him the dignity of hard work, hands rough from labor, voice steady with purpose. And then there was the man who opened doors to his imagination, who taught him how to dream beyond the limits of the world he knew. One shaped his heart. The other shaped his future. And then, without warning, both were gone. There were rare moments, quiet ones, when Magic allowed the world to glimpse the weight he carried. Moments when he confessed, "I had everything people dream about." But inside, I felt like a son who no longer knew how to walk without his fathers. Success had never felt so heavy. Loss had never felt so close. But grief, even in its hardest form, taught him something unshakable. The parts of those men that mattered most never truly left him. Their guidance lived on in the choices he made. Their courage echoed in his resilience. Their love, steady, unwavering, showed up every time he held his own children close. At family gatherings, when he caught Cookie's laughter from across the room, or saw his children stepping into their own purpose, he realized a truth both fathers had passed down in their own way. He walked forward because life insisted he must, but a piece of him stayed behind in those hospital rooms, in those final quiet moments, moments without words, but filled with meaning, silences that would follow him through every achievement, every challenge, every victory that came after. For 33 years, Magic Johnson has lived inside a countdown that the world once believed no one could outrun. Yet every morning, he rises and proves time wrong all over again. People remember the smile, the trophies, the championships, the business empire. But his body remembers something else, the day HIV became his shadow. Every dawn begins the same way. Magic sits on the edge of his bed, breathing slowly, giving his body a chance to catch up with his will. Some mornings, the pain loosens its grip. Most mornings, it does not. His joints ache like old machinery. His lower back burns in steady waves, a reminder of NBA battles and decades of treatment. On his nightstand sits a small bottle, predictable, constant. The cap clicks open at the exact same minute every single day. That rhythm isn't habit, it's survival. One missed dose could set off a chain reaction inside him, quiet but dangerous. And each time he looks at the pill resting in his palm, he remembers a time when pills like this didn't exist. A time when a diagnosis wasn't a fight. It was a countdown. When hope was a rare thing and survival felt like a distant dream. Every sunrise feels borrowed, he once whispered. Oh, but I treat each one like a gift. And when the sun finally slips away, when the world grows quiet, the battle simply changes shape. Pain never arrives with warning. It moves silently, settling into the deepest parts of him, refusing to leave. It travels from his spine, down his left leg, turning even the smallest movement into a reminder, like pressing on a bruised life refuses to let heal. Doctors give it names like chronic degenerative discomfort. Magic calls it something simpler, the cost of staying alive. But Cookie, she knows before he ever speaks. She hears the rustle of the sheets, the long, tired exhale, the silence that carries more weight than words. In the dark, she reaches for him, her hand resting over his heartbeat. And with the gentlest voice, she whispers, In the late 1990s, sleep rarely came. On many nights, he wouldn't rest for more than 90 minutes at a time. And more than once, pacing slowly on swollen ankles, he found himself staring into the darkness, asking the question every long-term patient eventually whispers into the silence. Will tomorrow hurt more than today? But even then, pain never gets the last word. For the world stirs before the city fully wakes, the gym lights snap on, cold, bright, unforgiving. And Magic walks inside with the quiet resolve of a soldier stepping back onto familiar ground. The treadmill starts slow, then faster. Sweat forms at his movement doesn't erase the pain, but it takes away its control. Every mile I run, he once said, is a mile the virus doesn't get to take from me. Cardio turns into stretching. Stretching becomes weights. And when the work is done, he walks outside, letting the morning air wrap around him like a small, silent victory. People often tell him he looks younger every year. He laughs politely. He appreciates it. But he also knows the truth. Every strong photograph, every confident public moment rests on top of a dozen private battles. Moments no one sees. Moments he had to overcome alone. And then there are the hospital rooms. 214, 306, 112. Rooms with walls he could recognize even in a dream. Rooms where the air always felt a little heavier. Rooms where life was measured not in minutes or milestones, but in numbers and medical markers most people never have to learn. Yet through every needle, every scan, every sleepless night that stretches far longer than it should, Magic keeps rising. He does not rise for applause. He does not rise for headlines or legacy. He rises for the people who need to see that rising is still possible. For the older fan living with joints that ache the way his do. For the parent managing high blood pressure while juggling life's burdens. For the man who fears speaking his diagnosis out loud. For the patients swallowing another bitter pill, trying to stay brave in the silence. He rises for them. Magic's strength isn't loud. It isn't flashy. It is quiet, humble, and earned the hard way. It shows up in the small victories, the pill taken exactly on time, the morning walk finished despite the stiffness, the smile he gives even after a night that left him drenched in sweat and... His strength isn't the days you feel good, he once said. A strength is choosing to live on the days you don't. That truth, simple, honest, unwavering, sits at the center of his life story. The championships made him a legend. The business empire made him influential. But survival, faithful, disciplined, courageous survival, is what made him extraordinary. Illness does not define him. Courage does. And as long as Magic Johnson wakes each morning, breathes carefully, and reaches for the pill that keeps tomorrow within reach, the fight continues. Not for fame. Not for history books, but for life itself. Now, at 66 years old, Magic Johnson stands in a rare, almost mythical category of human achievement. A man who rebuilt himself so many times that even the world's doubts eventually stepped aside. His net worth surpassing $1. $5 billion isn't a symbol of excess. It is the final proof of what relentless determination can build from the humblest of beginnings. His primary home, a multi-million-dollar estate in Beverly Hills, rests behind private gates and perfectly sculpted hedges. But this place is more than a residence. It feels like a sanctuary, a peaceful retreat carved from decades of hardship and hard-earned triumph. Set across rolling hillside acreage, the estate opens through stone terraces that guide you past walls of glass glowing gold with the early sunrise. Inside, a soaring two-story great room displays museum-level artwork. Floor-to-ceiling windows frame the Los Angeles skyline as if it were a live painting created just for him. Outside, palm-lined walkways stretch like invitations to breathe. A heated infinity pool blends into the horizon. Private citrus trees perfume the air, and a firelit outdoor lounge glows softly at night, suspended between luxury and serenity. Another quiet reminder of just how far he has traveled from where he began. And this is only the first jewel in the crown he built for himself, piece by piece, year by year. Down the coast, his Dana Point villa rises above the ocean on a cliffside bluff, majestic, unwavering, as if carved directly from the edge of the Pacific. Roman columns anchor its entrance. Hand-carved stone balconies overlook the endless water below. Terracotta rooftops glow warm under the California sun. And walls of floor-to-ceiling glass catch every wave, every cloud, every golden sunset that melts into the horizon. When the world becomes too loud, when life presses too hard, this is where he breathes. This is where he reminds himself that stillness is also strength. When he seeks true solitude, he escapes to his Palm Springs desert compound, a quiet refuge shaped by minimalist design, earthy tones, and open courtyards filled with cacti that stand tall against the heat. Here, the silence is deep. The only sound is the whisper of desert wind moving across the sand. For a man who has spent his life surrounded by crowds, pressure, and cameras, that silence becomes sacred. Beyond these personal sanctuaries lies a vast commercial real estate empire. Shopping centers, mixed-use developments, office towers, properties that grow in value year after year like quiet, steady engines. They stand as monuments to something he learned long ago. Land is memory made permanent, a foundation no one can take away. He once measured space in inches, sharing a room with siblings, carving out little corners of comfort where he could. Today, he measures space in acres, skylines, and horizons. His luxuries don't feel like indulgences. They feel like physical proof of a life he fought to extend. His Rolls-Royce Phantom glides through Los Angeles with a silence so complete, it feels almost spiritual. The Mercedes Maybach 680 rests in his garage, like a sculpture made of precision and intention. The Bentley Continental GT roars with smooth elegance, power delivered like a melody. Inside a climate-controlled vault wrapped in soft leather, he keeps a collection of timepieces, each one a masterpiece of craftsmanship. Patek Philippe Grand Complications, Audemars Piguet Royal Oaks, Rare Rolex Day Date, and Daytona editions. Every watch reflects the precision, patience, and discipline that have defined his life. For travel, he relies on Gulfstream-class aviation, a necessity for a man whose days stretch between boardrooms, arenas, hospitals, and charity events in cities across the nation. Family vacations unfold on privately chartered yachts drifting along the Amalfi Coast or gliding through the Bahamas, where he stands on the sun deck and watches the sea shimmer under lantern light and the sound of his family's laughter. Private chefs, temperature-controlled wine rooms, home theaters with velvet seating, walk-in dressing suites, dedicated art galleries curated by world-class experts. His life is now woven with details so refined, so far beyond what he once knew, that the boy riding garbage trucks beside his father at dawn could never have imagined them. But the greatest luxury of all, it isn't the cars, it isn't the estates, it isn't the aircraft or the art, it is time. The simple, extraordinary privilege of waking up again, of watching sunsets he once feared he wouldn't live long enough to see, of growing old, an achievement many believed would be denied to him. Time is the treasure he cherishes most, yet the empire that defines him most isn't the one made of stone, glass, or gated estates. It's the empire built through intellect, instinct, and a kind of courage that has nothing to do with courts or crowds. Magic Johnson Enterprises has grown into a quiet force in American business. Movie theaters brought back to life in neighborhoods long ignored. Starbucks locations placed intentionally in communities where corporations once refused to invest. Real estate developments that didn't just create profit, but revived entire blocks, giving families new places to gather, work, and grow. And then, there are the teams. Ownership stakes in the Dodgers, the Sparks, Lafke, and the Commanders. Franchises worth billions, shaped in part by his belief in what a city can become when it has something powerful to cheer for. But behind every headline, behind every multi-million-dollar deal is something much quieter. Something more meaningful, his responsibility to give back. Through his foundation and his personal philanthropy, he has directed millions toward HIV awareness, healthcare access, scholarships, youth programs, and community revitalization. And there are moments rarely discussed publicly, when he reaches out privately to families navigating long-term illness. Not because it makes news, but because he knows intimately what it feels like to carry a burden that follows you everywhere. His life whispers an essential truth. Success means nothing if it doesn't lift someone else. Still, the truest version of magic isn't found in boardrooms or stadiums. It lives at home. In the slow, quiet mornings he shares with Cookie, 2 cups of coffee, soft sunlight, and gratitude filling the air. In unhurried breakfasts overlooking the hills, where peace feels like a blessing earned through years of storms. In the way he speaks to Edge, with pride, with understanding, with admiration for the courage and authenticity that define Edge's journey. In the way he encourages Elisa's independence, celebrating every milestone, every moment of her becoming. In the way Andre stands beside him today, not just as a son, but as a pillar of the Johnson legacy, a trusted partner helping shape their family's future. Magic often talks about protection, not of trophies or possessions, but of the people he loves. He speaks about building something that lasts, something that can outlive him, structuring inheritance, safeguarding generational wealth, ensuring Cookie and the children are secure long after his chapter closes. Because for Magic, real legacy isn't measured in numbers, teams, or properties. It's measured in the lives he prepares to carry forward. These are not the actions of a man desperate to hold on to anything. They are the thoughtful choices of someone who has looked directly at life's uncertainty and decided to meet it with dignity. A man who understands that love is not only a feeling, it is preparation, responsibility, and quiet devotion. And so, with every disciplined routine he follows, his medication, his exercise, his rest, his constant monitoring, he moves with a spirit that has only grown stronger through the years. He breathes more intentionally now. He reflects more deeply. He loves with a steadiness that age has only sharpened. In the end, we are brought to the very heart of his story. Magic Johnson's life is not simply the story of a legendary athlete. It is not solely about success, fame, or even survival. It is the living proof of what the human spirit can become when challenged. It is a testament to the courage to rise from humble beginnings, to rise above public scrutiny, to rise through struggle, to rise through illness, to rise through fear, to rise again and again and again, until the world no longer sees the young boy teased on a neighborhood sidewalk, but sees instead the man who refused to let any single moment define the rest of his life. His journey teaches us that health is precious, that the choices we make today echo into our tomorrows, and that awareness can save lives. It reminds us that bravery doesn't always appear loud or dramatic. Sometimes it begins with simple honesty. Honesty with ourselves. Honesty with the people we love. Honesty about the lives we hope to protect and the futures we hope to build. His story offers a quiet but powerful invitation. Take care of your body. Listen to the warnings life gives you, understand your risks, speak openly about your well-being, and choose responsibility without shame or fear. Not because we are flawless, but because we are human. And being human means our lives are worth protecting. And before the story closes, if Magic's journey touched you, if it moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength, your own endurance, your own ability to rise, we ask you to consider liking this video. Your small gesture helps honor a life shaped not just by victories, but by transformation. From everyone here at Golden American Stars, we extend our heartfelt wishes to you and your loved ones. May your days be filled with health, peace, and steady strength. May every sunrise greet you with gentleness. May every challenge reveal the resilience that has lived inside you all along. And may you always remember, just as Magic Johnson has shown the world time after time, that no matter where you begin, no matter what storms you face, you hold within you the power to rise into a life far greater than anything you once imagined.